It's a dangerous drug. Hype builds expectations, and expectations is the killer of joy. Meet the MIYOO FLIP. The MIYOO FLIP could have been king, and instead, it's a reminder of how timing can kill great hardware. This could have been a device many would have hailed as a perfect emulation system, but it's 2025, and unfortunately for MIYOO, we now have so many other systems that the FLIP must contend against. On paper, the MIYOO FLIP seems like it checks most boxes for an entry-level system, but does it live up to all the hype? Well, let's find out. With the RG35XX-SP, the RG34XX-SP, the Powkiddy V90, the V90S, and now with MIYOO's entry into the clamshell game, it's making what would have been an easy decision a bit more complicated. But today, I'll help by making this as simple as possible to narrow down the strengths and weaknesses of this new system. When purchasing the MIYOO FLIP, it comes in a pretty simple box with a childlike crayon rendition of the model name. I would have given it a different style, but who cares, we aren't reviewing boxes, so let's open this bad boy up. Inside, it's nice that the device comes with its own great carrying case, which I wish more systems did. Inside is the system, a standard USB-C card reader, a USB-C charging cable, and a screen protector that you'll probably mess up like I did because this thing was flimsy. But luckily for me, it's a clamshell design, so whatever. Turning the device on, I was met with the standard MIYOO home screen, soon realizing I hadn't placed the pre-configured name brand SD card from MIYOO. This is one of the main reasons I choose to get my handhelds from MIYOO, especially if you are a beginner who wants to start gaming as soon as possible. When purchasing a system with an SD card, you'll get a reputable brand name card with all the games right out of the box, plus CrossMix OS pre-installed, which is a much welcomed addition as it comes with a lot of fixes unlike the original configuration. BatPixel has a great video that does a good job explaining some of these new features, link in the description. Now, right off the bat, I noticed that if I place this SD card into the first SD slot, for some reason the system icons just don't appear. I don't know if this is something that had to do with how they installed the firmware or if it's something else, but it's a minor annoyance at worst, so I ended up just placing the SD card into the second slot. The battery was at 60% upon arrival, and I noticed how light this device felt compared to my RG35XX-SP. It doesn't feel as premium as I had hoped, but I will say the texture of this plastic on the V2 model is really smooth and gives off a milky frost-like texture, which is something I really enjoy as it's not a fingerprint magnet like the previous models. Another thing I noticed was the stick calibrate screen was kind of messed up on my system. When pressing A to calibrate these joysticks, for some reason the text that tells you what to do decides it doesn't want to show up. Now on the right hand side of the system is a power button, a reset button, and the number 2 micro SD slot. On the top you have an HDMI out port for video out and a USB-C for controller input. Do note, you won't be able to charge the device using this port, which I had to find out the hard way. Oh yeah, you also get an instruction manual. I don't know, might come in handy. On the left side of the system is a volume rocker and slot number 1 for another micro SD card. On the bottom is a 3.5mm headphone jack and the USB-C charging port. And right in the middle, once you open this thing up, it comes with a single mono speaker. And oh boy, do I have some opinions about this speaker. On the face of the device, you have the standard ABXY buttons in a Nintendo theme layout, a D-pad, L and R joysticks with L3 and R3 buttons when you press them in, which is a nice addition, a menu button in the center, start and select, and on top you got the 2 shoulder buttons. The ergonomics are almost identical to the Game Boy SP, as this device is nearly the exact same size. Finally being able to actually hold this thing in my hands, I must say that MIYOO did an excellent job with button placement, especially with the shoulder buttons, as I like to rest my fingers in this position, making it very easy to access individual shoulder buttons pretty accurately. The thumbsticks were surprisingly responsive, and there's enough tension making these joysticks feel very similar to that of the PS Vita. Having these thumbsticks makes games on the N64, the PlayStation, and Dreamcast so much more of an enjoyable experience, which adds to the versatility of this device. However, the L3 and R3 buttons are way too easily triggered when pressed. I noticed while gaming that I would constantly accidentally push them during intense gameplay, so I just chose to leave these buttons unmapped. Now, the face buttons on this device are probably one of of my favorite aspects of this entire system. They are soft, perfect amount of tension before activated when pushed, and most importantly, they're quiet. Even the shoulder buttons feel great to push, and they don't rattle like, say, the RGSP. Like when I shake this system, there's minimal rattle. However, when you start opening and closing the device is where things start to get a bit rough. Personally, I'm not a fan of these predetermined locking positions. It's something that you'll obviously get used to, but it just feels so, I don't know, like crunchy, I guess would be a good word to describe it. It just feels like you're breaking the thing, and honestly, given the recent history of this device and its temperamental hinges, it's just not an enjoyable experience, as it feels like you're degrading the integrity of the entire system each time you want to play with it. And when comparing that to the RGSP, I mean, it is a massive difference. I guess it's user preference, but I prefer my peanut butter smooth, that's all I'm saying. The OS functionality is decent. It's not terrible, nor is it great. As we have come to know and love many other front ends that exudes a level of polish, CrossMix OS has become one of my favorite front ends on my TrimUI systems, as well as Onion OS on previous MIYOO models. This version of CrossMix sits somewhere in between. There are many themes that came preloaded with my system, however, there were some glaring visual mistakes. Primarily on the menu, when you're shuffling through certain styles like Clean Onion GB for instance, which I found to be very disappointing because I love this theme. The titles are duplicated, which looks... However, I landed on the Nano Switch Dark theme that felt perfect for this device. Another plus is having the ability to switch over to Emulation Station, which looks gorgeous on this device, but I found the navigation to be more taxing than the previous style. Finding custom folders aren't exactly easy to navigate to, but this might be easily remedied in the settings, and because of this, I chose to stick with MIYOO UI for going the visually pleasing aesthetic of Emulation Station, as I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to manually change cores within the ES menu, as the Y button is binded to adding and removing favorites. Now onto performance. So for performance, you're getting what is to be expected from the Rockchip RK3566, which is in many other devices, particularly with Anbernic, meaning you're going to be getting good performance PS1 and below. As for some of the higher end systems, it's more of a mixed bag. My tests came back a bit different than what I've heard, and I want to be as accurate as possible, especially to temper expectations for some of the more popular titles that you might be getting this system specifically for. I don't know if this is something that can be fixed with future patches, but the God of War series on the PSP, Chains of Olympus in this example, ran terribly. Sure, you can add one frame skip to help the processing, but even still, the MIYOO FLIP seemed to underperform against my RG35 SP. For these graphically demanding games, you might be able to get by adding that extra frame skip feature, but personally, I dislike the choppy gameplay, but I guess it does work in a pinch. But come on, this is a huge bummer, as the entire reason for choosing a system with joysticks is to play some of these popular titles. Am I saying that it doesn't run at all? No, you can get by, you know, it's gonna be choppy and the audio is gonna be popping everywhere. And truth be told, I didn't expect PSP to run perfectly, but when you're spending more than say a TrimUI Smart Pro or Brick, which handles PSP better in my opinion, it's kind of a letdown, especially in this awesome form factor. But that's not to say that every game isn't playable, as many other PSP titles ran just fine on the 1x resolution. And where the Flip really shines is with PlayStation games. Having these additional analog sticks in such a small clamshell form factor really makes this device stand out for those with portability in mind and wanting to play games on systems like the PlayStation, the Dreamcast, and N64, but keep in mind, again, not every N64 nor Dreamcast game will run perfectly, but it's much more playable than the PSP. One of my favorite games on the Dreamcast, which is Jet Grind Radio, is such an enjoyable experience to play on the Flip, as joysticks are a bit of a necessity in terms of gameplay mechanics for this game. So if you're someone who's looking for a super compact device to play all your PlayStation and Dreamcast classics with the comfort of having joystick controls, this might be a system to keep in mind. Another thing I noticed is how there's this weird green tint to the screen, whereas the RG35 seems to produce way better colors. Not to mention, the brightness levels on the MIYOO Flip is a little bit lacking. The Flip comes with a 3000 mAh battery, and from my tests, I'm only averaging around 4 hours before needing a charge. Playing higher demanding games like Dreamcast will set the battery back down to like 3 hours after a full charge, which isn't great. For such a portable device, I wish it had a longer battery life, but you're bound to make sacrifices somewhere with such a small form factor. They did manage to pack in a lot of features for such a compact device. When comparing the size of the Flip to the RGSP, you can actually see how much smaller this thing really is. Now, as I continue to do more tests, I did notice the top of the system starting to get a little bit hot, but it's nothing like the heat the TrimUI brick brought. Furthermore, I didn't think I would actually like the joystick placement when I saw a picture of this thing, but I was actually able to sit for over an hour playing Mario Kart, and the controls felt great, which is a huge bonus when it comes to these smaller EDC type consoles. Portmaster ran surprisingly well. It's always incredible seeing budget handhelds run Half-Life or GTA 3. Just another reminder of how old I'm getting. In Portmaster, you can press the X button to bring up 3 different options for running games, which does seem to help performance. Super Nintendo games actually look pretty fantastic on this screen size. And speaking of the screen, the Mac DIY SD card came with some really good filters. I always like to set up my Game Boy and Game Boy Color cores to match my preferences for overlays and filters. I found this filter called Authentic GBC Fast GLSP. It's quite nice for the Game Boy Color as it gives off a subtle chromatic aberration effect, which really is reminiscent of the actual system. And for the Game Boy, I love to use the same filter, which is Midori. It's just a color thing I do. There are hundreds of colors to choose from, and for some reason, this one just stands out to me. Now, as for the sound quality, the speaker in the middle of the system is subpar at best. You'll find that the treble peaks quite often, which is so harsh that I usually don't set the volume any louder than 90%, as the high-pitched sounds are pretty annoying. And let's be honest, most of these systems, like even the TrimUI brick, I had issues with the sound quality. It's not great, but the MIYOO Flip in particular, it's not the greatest audio. So with all these critiques in mind, who is this system actually for? Well, if you're somebody who loves the PlayStation and you want to have a compact system that has joysticks, well, maybe the MIYOO Flip might be for you. Or if you want to play Dreamcast games and you need a system that's a little bit smaller than, say, a TrimUI Smart Pro, then maybe the MIYOO Flip is for you. However, I have to say, because of the price, it's very hard to recommend this system in this current state. The PSP performance is just abysmal in my opinion, and if I'm spending over $100 like the MIYOO Flip, well, I expect PSP to be at least playable at 1x with 1 frame skip, and for my tests, I don't know if it's my system that I got, but it's just not up to par with what I'm used to. If you have around $120 to $130 to spend, there are plenty of other systems that I would highly suggest. So that doesn't mean that the MIYOO Flip is a complete pass. I am happy that I have one, and I hope that in the future certain things change, because if you look at where the MIYOO Flip struggles, it's in areas where there's potential for improvement. For instance, the custom firmware. Updates in the future might help with improving the performance. Hopefully we'll see a wider range of different custom firmware options, and as for the price, that can change, and I do think it should change. I don't think this device is better than the TrimUI Smart Pro or the brick. I think this device should be cheaper. And again, these are just my own personal opinions. You can think whatever you want, but I just don't think the MIYOO Flip was worth the hype, unfortunately. But on the bright side, I do have an RG34XX on its way to me. Hopefully I'll get that soon, and I do want to make a video comparing all three of these handhelds as they're so similar, especially since the RG34XX is around the same size as the MIYOO FLIP. But for now, if I had to choose one or the other, I'm still happy with my RG35XX. And with that, thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far into the video, congratulations, you have a much better attention span than 95% of other users on YouTube. Also, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, tell your friends about this channel. I mean, come on, we're building a community. If you don't want to, that's fine, I guess, but hey, sucks to suck, right? Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you're on the fence about maybe the RG35XX, I got a video that I think you should check out. It might be that one video that pushes you over the fence, so that video is coming up right now.